right here, what we're in is the Ocheti Shakowin camp, and so the Sacred Stone camp across the way has their own kitchen too. I think that right now there's probably about 7 kitchens.
I mean, that's quite an enterprise. That's quite a bit of food. I mean, this is a big operation.
And it's funny because when you're out here, you start getting used to, hey, I wonder if we should go to Hupa tonight, or yeah, I heard they're making,
like a different restaurant.
Yeah, like, oh, I heard they're making enchiladas over here. So if you want to come over here with me, this is where people drop off donations, whatever it may be as far as food, tents, anything like that. And I'll just lift the flap for you so you can see all of the goods: toilet paper, toothpaste, deodorant.
The thousands of water protectors at Standing Rock, facing plunging temperatures, are winterizing the camp.
Explain to me why those American flags are upside down.
An upside down American flag is a sign of distress. And so we have been in distress out here ever since we've been attacked by the police and the military for simply saying, no, we do not want a pipeline underneath our drinking water source and on our unceded treaty territory.
This battle will escalate for water protectors such as Candy under a Trump administration. She and her family live in the heart of the North Dakota back-in oil fields. The impact on the air, water, and soil, coupled with the arrival of hundreds of oil workers housed in what are called man camps, has been catastrophic.
In many ways, this camp is a result of the battle you've been fighting for many years in the fracking fields.
Yes, yes. Since at least 2008, when fracking really hit my community, Fort Berthold, which is north of here,
Right.
in Newtown, North Dakota, and I would talk to people about fracking, and they would ask me, why was I talking about fracking? What does it have to do with Dakota Access Pipeline? So part of my work was to educate people about where the oil is coming from, which is in the fracking
And
oil
explain, as you have to me in the past, what that fracking has done, not only to your community, but finally to you personally.
Well, that one's a tough one. Because it's been really devastating.
I know.
And so, I just get so emotional.
Okay.
It's just been really, it's just a complete change. It's a 180 from the little community I grew up in where you knew your neighbors and where you borrowed a cup of sugar, you know. Walked around without fear as children, and it's not like that anymore. You can't leave your doors open. You can't walk around because, I mean, literally people try to kidnap our kids. Walking from home from the elementary school, and, you know, all these man camps spring up all over our communities, violence against
They
women.
prey on women, right?
I live right on the Missouri River. It's just that there's a man-made reservoir as a result of the dam that's called Lake Sakakawea. And so you can see the rigs that surround the river. They're on top of the hills because we're near the Badlands, the North Dakota Badlands. So obviously, where does that stuff go when it overflows? It runs down into the rivers, into the streams. And in fact, in July of 2014, we had a huge, over 1 million gallon spill. And they did a study. Nothing is growing there, wherever that water touched. And they said there's arsenic and selenium and tellurium and like all these carcinogenic compounds sitting right on the surface that are beyond levels for human or animal consumption. And that's still just sitting there not cleaned up.
And the water, the river.
The river is over 4,000 miles long. It runs through the heartland of this country. One of the things people don't understand is that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers back in 1944 came up with this brainchild called the Flood Control Act, also known as the Pick-Sloan Act, because there was flooding happening in St. Louis and Missouri. Incidentally, that flooding was happening because the Army Corps of Engineers went in and removed the natural riparian water zones and were putting up, you know, cement walls. So they were the reason that this flooding was occurring. And what they decided to do was come up into Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and they built a series of dams. Each dam was below a reservation. So Garrison Dam created Lake Sakakawea. The dam down here created Lake Oahe, which those are now our drinking water sources. So there's another connection here with the Army Corps of Engineers and why we're saying do not allow this permit, because you forced us to have this reservoir as our drinking water in the first place, and now that's under threat of contamination because of all of the fracking. And so there's so much more to it than just in the here and now. It's this whole historical context about what we've been facing as natives in this country, basically since colonization happened. And what this movement is doing is forcing this country to take a good hard look at what it actually is founded upon in the roots, which is the taking of indigenous lands.
And are people fishing out of that river?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, North Dakota is a huge fossil fuel state, first of all. We have 7 coal-fired power plants here. So as a result of the 7 coal-fired power plants, every single bit over the 11,000 miles of rivers, lakes, and streams in North Dakota is already contaminated with mercury. We're seeing sores and pusses. So the Fish and Wildlife Service has been taking samples, and they are finding that there are like dissolved solids and things that are obviously in the fish as a result of the fracking chemicals going into the water. Growing up on the reservation here in North Dakota, it was normal to have people around me be sick all the time. And so when I was in college myself, I was 2 years into my undergrad program, and I got diagnosed with a stage 4 sarcoma tumor. And I remember the first thing my mom did was like break down crying, and I remember consoling her like everything's gonna be okay, because I really believed it. I really believed that, you know, it was just something that I had to go through in my life, but I probably would have been a lot more scared if I had understood what that meant at the time. Most people that have a stage 4 sarcoma don't make it. And it's just, it makes me question why sometimes, like, why am I still here when other people lost their battle, and it's just so unfair. And then that's why a big part of why I'm doing what I'm doing is to talk about what does environmental racism mean? What does environmental justice actually mean in climate justice? And our own people in our own communities didn't even understand the concept that we were unfairly and disproportionately targeted by the fossil fuel industry because we lacked the resources to push back. That's why you don't see these things in Hollywood.
Right. Or Bismarck.
Yeah, or in Bismarck, because even this pipeline was rerouted from just north of Bismarck, rerouted down to just north of Lake Oahe. You know, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe's drinking source.
And one of the things you told me, the way they mask the cancer rates is that they don't measure it in your community.
Right.
They measure it in the place of treatment.
Right.
So we don't actually know how, there's no statistical data in these communities that will back up the points that you've made.
What I have is like 2 shoeboxes full of obituaries, and I can write on each of them when they died, well, the date is there, but what kind of cancer they died from. 2 shoeboxes full, and you know how thin a piece of paper is. Just from when I was little growing up, just from the people that I know, the funerals that I attended, not even extended family members. And so that's kind of the way that I've been able to use the information to put a face and a name to say this was so-and-so, this is what they died from. And maybe get some justice that way, instead of, you know, just being an ignored population. We've been through so much already by a government that literally had a termination era and tried to terminate us. Yeah. That's what's beautiful about this, is because we're still here.